When we think about the flow of our Jewish year, the most serious day is Yom Kippur, a day of self-reflection and awareness of our limited time and our shortcomings. The saddest day of the year is Tisha B'Av, the memorial day that marks the catastrophes of the destruction of the first and the second temple. And yet, there's this remarkable passage in the Talmud, Masechet Ta'anit, the tractate of our sages that deal with fasts. The Mishnah is the conversations of the rabbis of the early centuries, edited in about the year 200 in Israel. And then the rabbis of Babylonia would continue to discourse on the Mishnah. And that together equals Talmud. Here's what's written in the Mishnah. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel said, Israel had no days as festive as Asar Chamisha Asar Ba'av, on the 15th day of Av, Uva Yom Kippur, and on Yom Kippur, Shebehen Banot Yerushalayim Yotzot. On that day, the daughters of Jerusalem would go out, the clay lavad shu'ulin, dressed in borrowed white garments. Shelo levayesh et misha ein lo, that no one should be embarrassed that they lacked for those garments. And then the Mishnah continues describing Yom Kippur afternoon and the 15th of Av, 6 days after the day of mourning. The maidens would go out from Jerusalem and dance in the vineyards. Umahayu omrot, and what would they say? Bachur, young man, sa na einecha, lift up your eyes. Ure ma ata boreh lach, and see what you choose for yourself. Al teten enecha benoi, don't just look for beauty. Ten enecha b'mishpacha, place your eyes on the quality of the family. For we are taught, sheker hachen vehevel hayofi, deceitful is beauty, vanishing is appearances. Isha yirat Adonai hiti talal, but a woman who has awe for the ever-present one, she will be praised. And so we have this reminder that out of those deepest struggles of Yom Kippur and the prayer for God to forgive us for our shortcomings is the awareness that God is in the business of forgiveness. And so Yom Kippur afternoon was identified as a time for renewal, for beautiful maidens going out in white, quality of hopefulness of finding their beshert, their destined other. And likewise, on the day of greatest darkness, in which we reminded ourselves of the pains and are called on that day to be as if in mourning, the two fast days, Yom Kippur and Tisha B'Av, both open into the most rejoicing experiences of the calendar. I want to share one little additional piece from the Talmud, which will then elaborate on this borrowed clothing. Remember, the Mishnah said, and the words of the Mishnah are, that the daughters of Jerusalem would go out with garments that were borrowed. And now the Rab, Shelo levayesh misha ein lo, that's still the Mishnah, that no woman should feel embarrassed ashamed due to her lacking. And so the rabbis now in Babylonia, they ask, what was the nature of this borrowing? Tenu Rabbanan, the rabbis taught in a breita, a conversation. Bat Melech sho'elet mi bat Kohen Gadol. It's kind of a hierarchy of status that everyone had to ask to borrow from somebody of a lower rank among the aristocracy, so that a king's daughter would borrow a white garment from the Kohen Gadol's daughter. The Kohen Gadol's daughter would borrow from the Sagan, the deputy's daughter of the priests, and the deputy's daughter would borrow from the daughter of a Kohen anointed for battle. And the daughter of the Kohen anointed for battle, she would borrow from the daughter of an ordinary Kohen. And all other Jews, V'chol Yisrael, sho'alin zeh mizeh, the rest of Israel, one would borrow from another. Kedei shelo yitbayesh et mi she'ein lo, so that no one would be embarrassed by a lacking. This is, for me, a remarkably beautiful image. The concern of the sages, of young people, that among young people, there should be the opportunity for marriage and more. That in trying to allure a man on this day of celebration, a woman should be dressed like every other woman in white. Admittedly, there's finer fabrics. And admittedly, in the time of the temple, there was a hierarchy of a king and Kohanim. But everybody should borrow from a lesser status so as not to artificially present themselves as more than they were, more appealing than they were. And in fact, what the Mishnah asks women to remind the men is that yes, beauty is important, but even more is the nature of one's family, which again in a traditional culture meant the nature of the character that their family represented and had passed on to their daughters. And so on this, the Shabbat, after Tisha B'Av, the day after Tisha B'Av, we are reminded that darkness does pass, and it passes into rejoicing. And that nature of that rejoicing is a quality of equality, an opportunity for young maidens and for all amongst us. Ribono Shalom, Master of the universe, may we be resilient. May we know that COVID land is a journey we're on, but a journey in which we will reach the other side. We can only imagine the rejoicing, like D-Day, when COVID goes away. May we live with the faith of rejoicing ahead, and may we do so knowing that with equality comes quality of celebration. May we indeed know that a time will yet come to rejoice. Amen.